We are lighting the candle, a world that works. I'm Bill Carell, and I'm here with two of my favorite people, Jan Jeremias and Lisa Sheehan. And as we do every week, we're going to have a nice little conversation today, but we're also going to do a little transformational work with our podcast. We've been floating the idea to talk a little bit more specifically about life and what we think might be useful in people's lives, life hacks, if you will, or maybe something that's along those lines or quite different. It really won't make any difference to us simply because we're speaking from the heart to you, and we want to make sure that the time that you listen to us is time that's well spent. So, with that being said, does anybody have a topic that you'd like to discuss today as opposed to specific words?
Wasn't didn't Jan have an idea that I didn't know what it was. I just saw a text saying, "I'm glad you like the idea," but I don't know if that was a topic.
So, yeah, as opposed to having words and working off of that, we talk about actual life situations and maybe some helpful tips to get in and out of tough spots or just some things to help you have more enjoyment in your day. Is it along those lines, Jan?
Yeah, I that's what I was thinking about just because I feel like people out there are stressed, anxious, dealing with a lot. And if we could offer people any sort of helpful suggestions or tools to handle whatever they're going through in their life, that might be time well spent for us and useful for others.
Perfect. Well, I can kick off one thing. It seems that something that's been going on in my life for about the last 7 or 8 months is just a whole lot of grief. And the main thing that is going on while I'm being mindful of how lousy I feel about the situation is that I feel disconnected instead of mindful. So sometimes I have to just sit quietly and just whatever the feeling is, allow it, allow it to have full run over me for a moment or two. And sometimes that helps it pass. Just granting the being of that feeling that's so foreign to me usually, because I think you all know me as a pretty upbeat guy.
So silence is your go-to or being still?
Let me put it to you this way. There's a lot of prescriptions that I have tried.
Mhm.
I've tried too much alcohol. That doesn't seem to help all that much. I've tried screaming. Again, my mind is taken off of the hurt while I'm screaming, but as soon as I stop, I kind of go back to where I was before. I also use joking. We have the dad jokes, we
Mm.
have the granddad jokes. And I'll tell you what, the reason that I mention this is because I find that almost everybody I know has gone through some sort of serious loss. It's a disconnection from a loved one or a disconnection from a friend. And kind of the interesting part of that is even when somebody just moves away,
Mhm.
somebody you used to being around and they leave town and go to South Carolina, and you don't get to see them anymore. So it can be a really dark subject. And what if it's not? What if it just fills the space of what's usual and ordinary for us once that usual and ordinary has been destroyed or gone or moved on? So I guess to like bring it up a notch, and not intensity with a bad feeling, but what if it's just part of a transition that we're not used to having? Do you remember any training as a child? This was one
And
of those things, was kind of like finance, you know? We don't talk about that.
Mhm.
no, we're Bolton.
Yeah.
I think also depending on your your local familial setting, whether that stuff was addressed or talked about was very personal. How open people were about whatever life circumstance you were going through, how much it was on the table, and how much it was considered to be like, you know, we don't want to destroy people's moods or we don't want to affect everybody else in the household. So we're just going to, basically pretend everything's okay.
Yeah, how a man handles it, how all the rest of that stuff, the cultural stuff, like what's
Mhm.
appropriate, what's inappropriate.
Yeah, or just in your own family. I mean, how much was actually shared about feelings and emotions and about life circumstances. And some of that has to do with, I think, parents and kids. Like they feel like, parents feeling like they have to shield their kids from things that are happening with them.
Yeah.
And part of it comes just, I think, probably in the lack of their ability to kind of express it and verbalize it. So therefore, it never got talked about. So it's not even something we grow up with necessarily learning or realizing how to cope.
Yeah, you think about everything else that we've got life hacks for. But one of the things that I noticed, especially over the last 2 or 3 weeks, um, for the time that we were having the celebration of life for our friends and relatives that passed, we were surrounded by a lot of people, all feeling in a similar fashion, and there was something kind of immediate about that, where being in the center of all of that, there's no real time to be worried about the past or thinking about the future, just engaged with conversation with loved ones and friends,
Mhm.
and having that feeling of maybe a little bit of joy that can creep in after a week or so of being, pretty well miserable.
It's the time after that that's the worst usually, it's when all the ceremonies are done and all the people have gone. I think that's the word, and I know in our we were the sweep it under the rug kind of people, you didn't talk about it. I think like Jan said too, it was a protection thing, unbeknownst to everybody else that not resolving trauma is worse and then starts to live in your body somewhere. So or emotionally you get stuck somehow, and it's not healthy as they've learned or as I've read to keep it bottled up, to not discuss it, to treat death as some unwelcome visitor that you hope doesn't visit you, and it's going to.
Uh,
Inescapable.
Yeah.
I love the way you phrase that, Lisa. Is like some unwelcome visitor because it's going to happen no matter to you at one point or another. Uh, I think very few people get by, um, not eventually losing somebody or losing even if it's just not even if it's just but just even a pet, you know, which is one of the reasons I love pets because I think it gives us that experience prior to sometimes having to having to have that happen with a close loved family member. We have that experience, depending on how early you get pets at a young age, can be at a young age. But and I think, some of it's generational. Like I look at the way, having lost my dad over the past, only a few months ago, looking at the way like my mother handles it and talks about it, and some of that is generational. I mean, my mother's, God willing, going to be 87, and that generation, they just like they didn't communicate their feelings very
Yeah.
easily. I-
Yeah, there's something about sharing a moment with somebody that allows you to kind of get out of whatever mindset isn't working for you. Like the Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, phone a friend or a get out of jail free card.
I think that's the important part too, is to, if you know somebody that's lost someone, to reach out to that person, to not be afraid to talk about it, to bring it up. Because and to not mention the person's name or a relationship ever again, because you don't want to stir up any sad emotions. And most people want to hear that person's name. They want to remember them. They want to know that somebody else remembers them, and that you shared some memories and love for that person. And it's, I love that, you know, grief is the price of love, so you
Yeah,
wouldn't be hurting if you didn't love the person that you just lost, kind of thing.
that was one of the analogies that was very helpful for me, and it had to do with um, creating a whole, which is creating a space for someone in your life. And the larger that space is, the harder it is to fill in, and that's what grief's job is to get you complete and whole again when your integrity is now broken through the loss of something that was a part of you, as a relationship is a part of you. Does that make sense?
Hmm.
Mhm.
So until you've actually done the work, and it is work, because as you said, Lisa, people make choices to not do anything about it. And it shows up in the body, and it shows up at inappropriate times, and they don't have control over it. To ignore it is almost like you just never wash your face.
Well, as you
And
say,
yeah, it turns out washing your face can be a good thing.
hmm and I think that if you're, I don't want to use this badly, like inappropriately, but if you're self-aware at all,
Yeah.
is realizing, like for myself, I really wasn't good. Like I went through the initial stuff, and then it was kind of like I shut this door, and I wasn't really functioning, but I wasn't really ready to go there either.
Yeah.
And it was almost like I was afraid that if I opened the door, like I wasn't going to be able to stop. So if I started crying, I was just like I wasn't going to be able to stop crying. So I was like, well, I don't want to go there. So I'm just going to shut that door right now. And I'm going to, and then eventually actually saying to myself, like you said to Bill earlier, is just sitting there and saying, like when the emotion comes, just saying, I'm going to sit with this. And I'm just going to let it be here for some moments. And usually for me now, what happens is I think of a fond memory, and then that fond memory turns into a sad one just because my dad's not here anymore.
Mhm.
But not like sitting there going like, okay, don't feel like that and distracting myself, which is I think what we tend to do is we distract ourselves from whatever we're going through. So we find something that's going to keep us busy. We listen to something that's going to sort of move our mind or our emotions out of that, and having to say, okay, well, right now, I'm not going to distract myself.
Yeah.
And that is work because it's something, those are painful places to go. So we tend to, it's human instinct not to want pain. I mean, or look for it, so to speak.
Yeah. It's so fundamental, and this is something that I learned a long, long time ago, but rarely is it available to me, like a fire extinguisher when I really need it. But whatever you resist will persist, and whatever you can presence fully will disappear. So there's something about being willing to let it all just wash over and risk that you're going to be changed on the other side, which is what I think we're afraid of. It's unknown territory. What life looks like after you fully realize, are aware, and your body and your soul have corrected themselves. It's not like you're giving that person up or away. You're now integrating all of that memory into who you are becoming as opposed to who you were. And I love the whole notion that no one ever truly dies until the last person utters their name, which is why I support the Wreath Project, for the veterans,
Mm.
where they walk around and they put a wreath, and the guys who put the flags, they read the fallen person's name out loud with respect. And that's cool.
Mm. Very cool.
Yeah, people who it's funny. I gotta share this with you. People who design how their final departure is going to be after they've passed, they crack me up because they don't get it. They think, first of all, they're going to live forever. And I'll share something personal about my two parents, because both of them were very specific about how they wanted to have things go afterwards. And my mom was really interested in an elaborate celebration, but she wanted to be cremated and have her ashes scattered all over the place. All right. That means it's more difficult for people to say your name. If you do not have a headstone somewhere, there's no sticky note out there in the world that basically says, I don't need to know who this person was, but I do know they lived. And I do know that people cared enough about them, to put this monument up. So there was that. And she does not have a headstone, but don't tell anybody, but I'm thinking about getting one for her. And then my dad. My dad was, military all the way, gung ho with regard to always keeping things simple, being a simple man, even though he rose to the highest ranks at Electric Boat. And he designed his path out. He's going to be buried in the National Military Cemetery over in Sarasota, Florida. He would be cremated. There would be no service and no calling hours. Just a quiet deal with the family getting together and hugging each other. But definitely no reception. Okay, so here's what happened. They moved up to Connecticut last year, no longer in Florida. So when he passed, we looked at Marianne, his wife, who's still here, and said, what do you want to do? And she said, I want to have an open casket, very tastefully done. I want to have a calling hour, 1 hour. I want, a church funeral. And then I want a procession to the grave site. And I want, full dignified everything we can possibly do for him. So we got an honor guard from the Air Force to come out, which was fabulous. And then afterwards, we went over to a restaurant, and we got there at around 1 o'clock, and nobody left until 6. We just enjoyed each other for 5 hours. So what I'm saying to you is, if you got some idea of how you think people are going to deal with your passing, you might want to give that up and leave it to the people who are still here that have to deal with the whole. So no recrimination. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, and I guess, coming from a very traditional, like most of my family being Orthodox and Jewish, there is a particular way everything is done.
Yes. And
very ceremonial. Now I look at it, and the whole thing is very interesting to me, because the rules around, let's say, what you can do within the first year and what you can't do are different for me, because I was a daughter versus my mother, who was a spouse.
Right.
And it's very interesting to me that there is so much difference in what, in that whole year after mourning, and the fact that, a child, there's never any relationship that substitutes that bond. Somebody can get remarried, but basically you only have one parent or two parents, and and that biological connection. And it has to, from what I understand, it has to do with biological, which is interesting if you happen to be adopted or whatever. And I don't know all those rules, but um, it's very interesting. When you were saying, Bill, about saying someone's name, I think it's just so interesting because my family is Ashkenazi Jewish, so we're from European, not Spanish or Sephardi, and we name after the dead. So you only name someone after someone who has passed in general, if you have a close family member
Sure.
that has passed. And so their name lives on.
Mm.
And so as you said that, I thought to myself, wow, hopefully there will be another person that it has my father, another being that will be born that will have my father's name.
Yeah.
And it's just such an interesting, um, like just honoring to me
Yeah.
to value somebody that much. And that's why you never see, where you'll have a child and a father with the same name, at least in Eastern European Jews. It's just you don't see it. I mean, I was named after my great grandmother and my great uncle. And that kind of history and the value of family and relationships is then very strong to me.
Yes. Yeah. I want to just stop a minute and kind of examine the word interesting because we use it an awful lot. And for the folks at home, by interesting, we don't mean that it catches our awareness. We mean it stokes curiosity. It really gives us a flavor. There's a what's up with thatness about it, and it's something that is worthy of spending more attention and generating interest, And so when we are in the middle of a situation that's maybe disempowering, might be good to start asking yourself questions and get into that zone of what's up with that.
And I do that a lot lately. If I'm in a
Me-
particular situation and it makes me feel uncomfortable for any reason, I'm like, why is that? Like, what about this situation is making me feel so whatever it is, scared, frightened, insecure, or would, put in whatever you substitute for yourself. But
Sure.
I'm very into looking at those situations.
Have you had one recently, Jan?
Yeah, well, sometimes I'll be on a meeting, for example,
Hmm.
and all of a sudden I'll think to myself, like, I'm on I was on a networking meeting, and I don't know, with this particular group of people, I just felt very, I don't know, very quiet, kind of reserved, like I wasn't really willing to share much. And afterwards I got off and I thought, wow, isn't that interesting? Yeah, I'll use your word, Bill, or our word. And and then kind of delving into it a little deeper, realizing that I don't really feel like I have that a whole lot in common with these people, that a lot of the things I consider important,
Hmm.
at least from the surface, they don't seem to share. And it's not like I'm sitting there and saying, okay, well, this was a first time experience for me with
Yes.
this group. Um, it's after multiple times. And I'm not saying I didn't question it before, but this time I was like, really like, okay, well, okay, let's figure out what this is all about.
Hmm.
I got a couple of questions that you can default to simply because there are a lot of psychologists who will say that there is actually nothing in the world that's really going on. It's all in your mind. It's being created through this filter of all of your experiences, beliefs, and all the things that you don't know are there. So one of the interesting, in curiosity tools to use are a couple of questions like, so what's going on and what am I making it mean? Because you and I both know that, you know, The world is empty and meaningless, and it's empty and meaningless that it's empty and meaningless.
Mhm.
So we are the meaning generators. We have no choice. It's what we do. It's how we're wired. So if you have a situation that is disempowering, or you're not feeling, in the state that you want to be in, you can have access to that state simply by saying, what's going on and what am I making it mean? Taking some responsibility in the moment, which if you're making it mean something, what does that say? I can
I
change
think
the
loss
meaning and
loss
yeah,
creates so many of those situations, though. Like when Jan, when you were talking, I was thinking because there's sometimes when you're afraid to, if you're in a group or especially people that you're not sharing deeply with, that you're afraid to be happy or joyful because it's kind of like dismissing your grief. So I ran into a lot of those situations where I was afraid to be happy or like, how dare I be happy? That kind of thing. It takes a while to get past that in so many situations. And I remember once having a dream where my friend came back to life and she was partying with everybody and I just looked and I went, now what do I do? Because the grief was such a strong part of my life, it
yeah.
was like,
Well, as you're saying that, Lisa, I'm thinking to myself, like over the past, like the past few years during the pandemic, I think people really felt like that. It was like
mhm,
there's so much going on and so much loss in the world. How can how can I get on and say, well, everything's great, you know, when there's so much happening? And I think that that's what ends up happening is we really feel like we can't show up as ourselves.
There's another possible, kind of an entree to that too, is that the ourselves that we currently are not the ourselves that we were before. And part of the grieving process is grieving that you're no longer complete and whole, and you know it.
mhm.
There are a lot of times when you can be very sure. Have you ever noticed that? Like you're certain of certain things in your life. And in that state, there's not much of that going on. In fact, there's a whole lot of, I really don't know much going on.
And I think there's a whole, for me, there was this whole identity thing, and my identity changed. So I went from being, you know, so I'm the youngest and the only girl. So, and I always called my dad daddy,
Mhm.
always, my brothers would be like, isn't that a little like juvenile? That you still call him daddy.
That's his
And
name.
that's his name. But all of a sudden I was like, oh my gosh, I'm no one's daughter. Like I don't have and there was this like little bit of like an identity crisis for myself of like, oh my gosh, like now that's gone. And then coming to the realization that I really feel like, I believe that they're here in some form energetically. I really do feel like energy doesn't die. So energy is energy and he's still there, and that I will always be his daughter, even though he's physically not here. But that took a good number of weeks or whatever. There's never any time limit in the whole
Right.
process. You go through things when you go through things in grief. But that was an adjustment. It was like, oh my gosh, like that's that relationship. And it was a very special relationship to me. So it's like, oh my gosh, like my role, or like who am I?
Yeah. It's my wife. Unfortunately, she lost her dad in '83. He was 83 years old then, and she lost her mom in um, '95, and she was 79. And so she was an orphan. She was an orphan in her mid 40s, and it really didn't sink in with her, for quite a while, that she was all alone in the world except for two cousins and their families. Um, but then she wasn't all alone in the world because we have all of my family and all the rest of that. But the notion of being an orphan, whether you're 5 years old, you're 55, or you're 69, it's still something that you have to be able to wrap your mind around. And I get it now because my mom passed in 2013 and my dad passed 2-3 weeks ago. And the whole idea of we're now, I'm the patriarch of the family. I'm the oldest son, and I've been getting really loving texts from my one brother. The other brother and sister are a little bit off, but that's okay. My brother Tommy, he is constantly reaching out and saying, "Okay, so got to do this, got to do that," and then I just answer him back, going, "We got this." That's where you fake it till you make it. It's a possibility that we've got this at the moment. It's not a true statement. It's not something I'm certain of. And quite frankly, I'm getting used to the feeling of being completely out of shape in terms of what I'm certain of.
Mhm.
That's starting to become familiar to me.
Hmm.
And every once in a while, a tear comes out of my eye for some unknown reason. Don't know what that's about, but I don't even care.
And I think one of the things that talk to people a lot, but it's easier to offer advice than basically go through it on your own and practice it yourself. And that is giving myself a break, like being compassionate for myself. And that, depending, I guess, on your personality and how hard you drive yourself, that could be different for everybody. But this feeling of, you know, it being okay that, however long the grief process takes, that if I don't do something because I don't feel up to it, it's okay.
Yeah.
Which, and what do you, okay, go ahead, Bill, because you look like you're going to, you could so resonate with that.
So, remembering COVID when we had our nighttime and daytime PJs, in the whole rest of my life, that would never have been acceptable. But, there are days when you're just not going to see anybody, right? So why bother getting dressed if you're in your comfies? And over the last, I don't know, 5-6 weeks, I've had 2 or 3 days in a row where I had my comfies on 24 hours a day. Exactly what you're saying. Well, why bother? And, you know, I can be clean and showered and not shaved, but, or I can have my comfies on and not really give a what.
That's why whatever it takes, I think, there's, if you want to talk to people, if you don't want to talk to people, support groups, church groups, grief counselors. I mean, whatever, do it all, or do none of it. But it's going to be like your own personal cocktail of grief serum. That you have to figure out how to digest and make it party, like you said, fill that hole, Bill.
I love that. And you can't say that too many times, Lisa. The phone a friend card. Holy mackerel.
Hmm.
You just reminded me of somebody that I know who is she's a practicing grief processor. She actually gets paid to coach people through early trauma resolution, which is really to have it be present and then disappear. And um, kind of coincidentally, she's also the scanner that searches my entire body every 6 months looking for cancer.
Hmm. Oh, cool.
So and she's fabulous. So I will give her a call.
There you go.
Simply because I don't have a lot of experience in this area of correcting the hurt. I know how to feel hurt. Trust me.
And I think the whole, what Lisa was talking about, and you mentioned Bill also, is the whole personalization of the whole thing. For some people, creating a memory book or looking at old photographs or
Yeah.
all those things is very healing. And for others, it's just too painful or it's just constant reminders or whatever, and they can't. I'm, what's so interesting to me is, I tend to write a lot. And during this time, I'll write, but it's something I'm not able to write about at this point. I almost feel like it's, it's just, I'm not able if a few moments, but considering how much I usually write, and especially about things that are bothering me,
Yeah.
um, I haven't been able to write about that. And I will, I know I will, but it's just not right now. And that's what I keep on saying to myself. Every time I pick up the pen, I'm like, not right now. So when I put it down.
I
That's where
love that.
other people's words help me so much, like
Yeah.
Hmm.
poems on grief or death, or sometimes if I'm taking a deep dive into grief, the sadder the song, the better. I'll just keep playing one sad song after another and let the waterworks begin and flow.
Yeah.
It's I match the mood sometimes instead of trying to get out of it.
That's smart.
It's
Well,
cathartic.
yeah. These are life hacks. I
Yep.
mean, these serious life hacks. And we started probably with one of the tougher
Yeah, right.
things for people to try to throw their arms around. But, all of life is about embracing what's going on for you right now, not trying to understand it, but just experiencing it and letting it fully take you over for a time. And I appreciate what you say, Lisa. Just keep playing sad song after sad song. That's a really great idea.
And you mentioned something earlier, Bill, which, and that's being quiet.
Yeah.
And I think that's why I've always valued my yoga practice so much because I tend not to play music when I practice. And so there is quiet. And there's also this feeling of it's the same when you meditate, is that you're there, so there's no escape. So there's this feeling of, the emotions that come in. And
Yeah.
when you talked about earlier, is just a tear falling, is I've practiced and all of a sudden I find I'm self crying and I have no idea why I'm crying. I'm not particularly sad. Nothing particularly is wrong, but there is some sort of energetic release that happens.
Yeah.
And it's almost, well, it's automatic. Like the tears just start to flow. And I had a client that I was working with about a week and a half ago, and we were doing a meditation. And all of a sudden afterwards, she said to me, I was crying, but I'm not quite sure why I was crying. And it's just this release, which I think we need to honor and just let happen.
I agree with you. The tears and anger are very young responses to things that happen. They're not the, steel-eyed, well-trained, ninja marine who goes into tough places and knows how to handle everything that comes up. We'll do all that other stuff later. When we get into a situation where our body behaves differently than we would like it to, it typically, indicates that there's just kind of a young response to that, and it's a real, raw, pure, authentic emotion. And with that in mind, um, I think the more you address it, you can upgrade it. The more you get in touch with how it's affecting you in the moment, and not the why of it, but the what of it. You know, it's unfamiliar, it's not appreciated. And then maybe that's part of the grant, giving yourself a break, is to take a moment to really appreciate this isn't usual. It's not ordinary. I've talked about the practice of focusing before. And there is a National Focusing Institute of psychologists that have worked on this for years and years and years and years. And what they did is they came up with a methodology of people who were winning in therapy and why they did. And it had everything to do with how they spoke. It had everything to do with how in touch at a very fundamental level that they could be between body and mind and spirit. And so part of the practice is to, lie quietly on a bed or something of that nature with your eyes closed, and then to relax, not as deep as meditation, but maybe about halfway there. And then engage a conversation, for between mind and body. And just a simple question such as, what is the main thing right now? And wait for an answer. And the first answer you get, that's not it. Probably the second answer. So you re-ask over and over again until the conversation comes back from your body that starts to describe what the feeling is going on inside of your body. And the very cool thing that happens is that at some point, if you become good at focusing, you'll have a felt shift, a felt sense, some kind of a twinge in the body, stomach, chest, somewhere. And the coolest thing ever is on the other side of that, there's this realization that that's complete. I can now move on. My body doesn't have to carry that around anymore. So focusing, you can go to Audible, you can go, to Amazon, and you can get a copy of that. And it's a marvelous practice.
I
Have you
speak a
had a
lot.
recent experience
Pardon
with
me?
it? Have you had a recent experience with it?
No, not recent, but I lived with it for after my mother passed. It was a practice that I was doing almost daily, 25 to 30 minutes, just lying quietly. And again, it's not something you have to worry about. If it's not coming to you, don't crunch and grind away at it. Don't make it into work. And just give yourself the permission to not know how to do it. But the doctor that wrote the book is a pretty good teacher, and I recommend him. And I will do it. Now, there's so many things I'm getting out of this conversation.
I hope you're taking notes.
Yeah. Well,
Somebody should be capturing this somewhere, don't you think?
I was thinking about that because I spend a lot of time asking people if they have an emotion, where they feel it in their body. Um, and where do you feel that emotion? And I had an experience, I think that I just remember there was a period of time in my life where I'd had an extremely bad heartbreak after the end of a relationship. And I remember feeling like there was a part right between my shoulder blades and my upper back that just felt like it was locked. And at the time, I was practicing yoga and a lot, and I would sit there, and I think in every class I would go through this like whole thing of like trying to open it and doing some physical action. I was like, oh my gosh, maybe if I position myself like this, it'll open. And I remember talking to my teacher at the time, and she said, you have to just let it open. It's going to open organically. And I remember sitting there thinking to myself, organically, schmanically, I just wanted to open because it was bothering me. It constantly felt like my back needed to crack and it couldn't. And I remember I was away in Mexico walking on the beach, and I just said, I'm on a yoga retreat. And I remember saying to myself, okay, I just got to let this suck. I just got to let it go. I mean, it was just like this feeling of like, I just got to let it go. And I went to class like not 5 minutes later, and I laid down on a yoga block, and my back cracked like 10 times. It like seconds later, really. And I remember sitting up, I think I turned white because the girl said to me, what happened? And I said, you're not going to believe it. And it was just this feeling of, I got to let this go. Like, I can't carry this around with me anymore. And it opened. And that was my experience of really holding some sort of, heartbreak physically in my body.
Yeah, well, you specifically asked for it, instead of
That's right. I was like,
ask and ye shall.
that's right. Ask and you shall receive. But be ready also for it to let go. I mean, I was obviously
Right.
ready to let go.
Right.
And
We don't always remember these really helpful, useful tips. Like, if there was a time, if I thought I was going to take a beating from somebody, I'd worry about it. I'd avoid it. And then one day, in my mid-20s, I just finally said, hit me with your best shot. See if I'm still standing. I never got hit. Unless there was alcohol involved, okay? But but seriously, that's that, that bring it, is it's very powerful to have that responsibility, and that you've got the control over saying, I'm gonna take whatever it is right now.
Yeah, I
Don't know
think
what
that's
it is, but
yeah, that's
yeah,
a nice strategy. That's another nice strategy, like to say if you're ready for it, sit down and just like you said, say bring it. Bring the
yeah.
grief. I'm ready, I'm ready. Let's play with it for now. Let's see where it takes me and play. But yeah, that's another
So let
interesting
me
game.
let me just put a little bit more information out here, in terms of the focusing, because I do believe that this is a gift for you all. And focusing is a step beyond mindfulness meditation. And there is an International Focusing Institute, and it was experiential listening as developed by Eugene, either Gendlin or Genlin. And it's a powerful way of interacting with innate body felt knowing, and leads to mutual respect, authenticity, and compassion. Mutual respect between mind and body. A lot of us don't appreciate what the body's going through, do we? We're not even aware of it to a large extent.
No, we're taught to ignore it for the most part from a young age. So I think
Exactly.
that's the embodiment practice is becoming it's like, one of the in things right now is because we've forgotten how to keep in touch with our body. So now everybody's trying to find practices to get back in touch with. Well, grief is one of the good ones because you can find it resting in all sorts of places and
Yeah.
to greet it there and see where it lands and like play a game, like I keep saying, like play with it.
Hmm. And I think it's interesting to sit there and if you are particularly specifically feeling in a certain way, going to the place of, okay, where do I feel this?
And it's not
Where?
easy.
eh, No, I mean, it's not easy at all. I mean, not to say you're always necessarily like, I think sometimes the brain almost gets in the way and you sit there and you
Mhm.
start to think about it too much. And you, your brain will say, oh, I feel it here when really it's not there at all. It's like,
And as Lisa says, it's also a great should generator where you're shoulding all over yourself.
mm,
You can't talk yourself out of a broken arm. I know a lot of really cool people, but I know nobody that can talk themselves out of a broken arm. A broken heart is the same thing.
Mhm.
Sad part of it is you can't, like get in there and without really getting in there and going to work.
Right. Practice the mending.
But stay off the should bus. Just let it be. Put Paul McCartney on and
And I think what's happening, especially as you get older and, more people are suffering from illness and of course more people are dying, but and I think you get closer to the I want to live my life better. We always say that when someone you lose somebody and they say, "Well, I'm just gonna live a better life now." I'm going to show them, or prove I can. And I think it was just more words than actions when you're younger. And I think I'm just taking it so much to heart now, so much more so. And I think that's an honor to the people that you lose too. And another one of the things I heard people do is like if like somebody's father was a great gardener and she had a black thumb, so but she decided to take it on and to honor her father that way, and she became a fabulous green thumb.
yes.
And then she connects with her dad every time she's gardening. And I thought that was a brilliant idea to take on something that the person you lost loves and start practicing it, or at least try.
Yeah, it's like all of this has to do with changing the shape of things, but you have to acknowledge and actually have some sense of what the shape of things actually are or there's no access to anything beyond where you are right now. And I know that sounds of sounds kind of airy fairy, but it's not. It's getting real with yourself, and really experiencing authentic reactions to your reactions is really the key to the whole deal. And the appropriateness of the time and place sometimes it's not great, but and if you've got a commitment to be a fully functioning human being, and you've got a commitment to being powerful in your life and for standing for yourself, because at the end of the day nobody else will, then the going beyond the I should live a better life, being reminded that my best friend just passed, or my dad just passed, or that sort of thing. I remember after high school, I had a friend who was on the Lockerbie Pan Am flight that was that was blown up, and it was senseless. They were in their 20s, and they were in Europe celebrating just getting married, and that one caused quite a few weeks of consternation, but also many declarations that I will be a better man.
Hmm.
Didn't know what that meant really,
True.
And I think
but
that's where what you said, Lisa, comes in, is that, we say those things, but we're not really sure what quite they mean.
Mm.
I'm going to live, quote unquote, a better life or whatever. And I think sometimes we don't understand exactly what that is.
yeah,
And as we get older, I think we have a better understanding a lot of the time what that means for us anyway.
And knowing it always changes too. I mean,
Absolutely. Right.
right. And I'm not, yeah, not, I don't, that it shouldn't be tied, should not be tied to any, well, especially a solution you thought was good 10 years ago, or any lifestyle. I'm constantly evolving, and that's what the fun of it all is too. But I do think experiencing loss and seeing people go through really hard times has been a catalyst for me doing that as well.
yeah, yeah. And I'm here to testify. You have a great life, and you are a great person. So there's nothing wrong with staying interested in that concept and continuously expanding to see where it goes. I love that. Guess we're never done, are we?
Nope. No.
Or as Yogi would say, we're not done till we're done.
Yeah, he was good at that. I was listening to and I don't know if it's because but like I was talking about poetry can help, and
Yeah.
so I was listening to this woman, and she's a poet, going through stage 4 cancer, and so but she wrote this poem a long time ago when I guess she had Lyme disease really badly, and wasn't sure if she was going to make it through. And the poem's about she had heard once that the soul actually misses the body when it leaves, and it was just such an interesting concept, and it also helps like appreciate your body and your life on the planet. So going along with the living a better life or trying to improve things, when you really appreciate the body that you have, the life that you have, I think it makes every day much more valued.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And I always sit there and think to myself, we're only given one body.
Hmm.
Yeah. So we've got to learn to take care of it because we don't get another one.
I mean, it's a
I
long
always-
point, but
yeah. Go ahead. Sorry,
I'm
Lisa.
no, go ahead, because I have to boot up again, so I don't know if it's worth it right now. You do it.
Well, I'll tell you what, I always really loved the notion of A Course in Miracles.
Oh gosh, yeah.
And, you know, setting up a responsible nature where you are accountable to yourself for the quality of your life allows for the most minute, mundane thing to be awesome.
Hmm.
And the training to experience life from a standpoint of wonder and amazement, it means there's never going to be a dull moment unless you forget to do that. So, there's a practice where you can put that on like a sweater first thing in the morning and challenge yourself to be totally, authentically, fully goosebump amazed by the smallest thing that you can find in the room.
I found it. Would you like to hear it? Let's see if
Yeah, sure.
I can do it any justice. Can you hear me good enough?
Hmm.
Yeah.
Imagine when a human dies, the soul misses the body, actually grieves the loss of its lost hands and all they could hold, misses the wanting lips, the searching tongue, the throat closing, shy reading out loud on the first day of school. Imagine the soul misses the weather of the chest, the hard weather when love storms away, misses the stubbed toe, the loose tooth, the funny bone. The soul still asks, why does the funny bone do that? It's just weird. Imagine the soul misses the tears and the thirsty garden cheeks, misses how the body could sleep through a dream. What else can sleep through a dream? What else can laugh? What else can wrinkle the smile's autograph? Imagine the soul misses each falling eyelash waiting to be wished, misses the wrist screaming away the blade. The soul misses the lisp, the stutter, the limp. The soul misses how hard the eyes fought off history to see clearly, to see the holy bruise blue from that army of blood rushing to the wound's side. When a human dies, the soul scours the universe searching for something blushing, for something shaking in the cold, for something that can scar, scours the universe for patience worn thin, the last nerve fighting for its life, how badly the voice box ached to be heard. The soul misses the way the body would hold another body, and not to be two bodies, but one pleading God doubled in grace. The soul misses how the mind told the body, you have fallen from grace. And the body said, erase every scripture that doesn't have a pulse. There isn't a single page in the Bible that can wince, that can clumsy, that can freckle, that can hunger. Imagine the soul misses hunger, emptiness, rage, the fist that was never taught to curl, curls, the teeth that were never taught to clench, clench, the body that was never taught to make love, makes love, like a hungry ghost digging its way out of the grave. The soul misses the unforever of old age, the skin that no longer fits. The soul misses every single day the body was sick, the now it forced, the here it built from the fever. Fever is how the body prays, how it burns and begs for another precious day. The soul misses the way that the body inflamed to hold its own loneliness. The soul misses the legs aching up the stairs, misses the fear that climbed up the vocal cords to curse that wheelchair. The soul misses what the body could not let go. What else could hold on that tightly to everything? What else could hear the chain of a swing set and fall to its knees? What else could touch a screen door and taste lemonade? What else could come back from a war and not come back, but still try to live, still try to sing a lullaby? When a human dies, the soul moves through the universe, trying to describe how a body trembles when it's lost, softens when it's safe, how a wound would heal given nothing but time. Do you understand? Nothing in space can imagine it. No comet, no nebula, no ray of light can fathom the landscape of awe, the heat of shame, the fingertips pulling the first gray hair and throwing it away. I can't imagine it, the stars say. Tell us again about goosebumps. Tell us again about pain.
And I think that's a pretty good place for us to wrap. Thank you so much for sharing that. That means a lot.
Namaste.
Well,
Yeah.
folks at home and folks present, do me a favor, do yourself a favor. Reach out to people in your life. Tell them that you love them. I don't mean be stingy and tell them you like them and that. No, try telling people that you love them, simply because every time you say that, it changes everything. Let them know that your life is better because they're in it. And in the meantime, we are lighting the candle, a world that works. Thanks, Lisa. Thanks, Jan.
I just want to say that was Andrea Gibson's poem. So I just want to honor her.
Thank you.
Have a good week.
Bye, everybody.
Bye for now.
You've been listening to Lighting the Candle, a world that works, part of the Exvadio Podcast Network. You can catch us each week, as well as the rest of the network, at exvadio.com/podcasts, as well as the Apple Podcasts app, Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, Audible, Amazon Music, and wherever you find podcasts.